Welcome to The Blue Dot, Northern Kentucky's premier political podcast, brought to you by the Kenton County Democratic Executive Committee. Welcome back to The Blue Dot podcast, where we tackle the kitchen table topics Kentuckians are talking about, like healthcare, jobs, and sometimes even bourbon.
And we also like to talk about what Democrats are doing to improve life for working folks in the bluegrass and beyond. I'm Brian Koehl.
And I'm Natalie MacDonald. And today we're diving into a bill so controversial, it's the most unpopular bill in 30 years. And that is none other than the big, ugly bill that was just passed. We'll also be speaking to Monica Dean, who is a Navy veteran and candidate for Kentucky's 4th Congressional District, which is currently held by Thomas Massie. And Brian, have you seen some of the attack ads that mega PACs have launched against him here?
Yeah, it's been unreal.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that whole disastrous bill. I know we're somewhat preaching to the choir with many of our listeners, but there's a lot in there that we can talk about. And I thought that maybe, the Senate would clean up this bill a little bit, but it just kept getting worse as it moved through the legislature.
Yeah, officially it's called the Big Beautiful Bill, but critics, including Kentucky's own Governor Andy Beshear, are saying, no thanks, we've seen this movie before. And it ends with a hospital closing. Not only is it the most unpopular bill in 30 years, it's likely the most unpopular budget bill ever. Recent polling has the average approval rating coming in at an incredibly dismal 31%.
Yeah, and I think those disapproval numbers are so warranted. So let's dig into it. Why, right? So why and what's in this bill that has everybody from like nurses to food bank directors sounding the alarm?
Yeah, right. Well, Nat, one quick note on that disapproval rating. Americans may actually hate it worse than that number we just gave. The Kaiser Family Foundation, now known simply as KFF, discovered in a poll in June that many voters were even unaware of the effects of the big ugly bill. And initially, those respondents gave the bill a 35% favorable, 64% unfavorable rating. But then KFF followed up with 2 what if you knew statements to see how the numbers changed. And when informed that the bill would result in about 10 million people losing health care, that disapproval went from 64 to 74%. And when told that rural hospitals would lose funding, that disapproval rating increased to 79%.
Those are incredible numbers.
Yeah,
and it's not
worst.
Really surprising that a lot of people don't know what's in the bill. I always have to remind myself that the average person is not a political geek.
That's right.
Like me and looks into all of this stuff. But what's, I guess, even sadder is that even the Republican legislators didn't know what was in it. Right. They didn't have time to read it. It was 1,000 pages. It was fast tracked to meet this, July 4th Trump deadline. And then we have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and saying she didn't read it. And she said she would have voted against it if she knew about some of the provisions that were in it. So Lord only knows what she and others didn't know what they voted for,
Right. And how many of them said they wouldn't vote for it? Josh Hawley was another one, said, we can't do this to Medicaid, but hey, in the end, they all fell in line, right?
They sure did.
Yeah.
They always do.
Yep. I read as well about the Republicans that hadn't really read through the entire bill and really didn't know what was in it. But, they were going to vote yes no matter what to avoid the wrath of their dear leader. This bill is the Trump administration's signature legislation, but still it barely squeaked through the Senate, requiring a tie-breaking vote from Vice President J.D. Vance. So what's in it? Buckle up. For instance, a permanent extension of the billionaire tax cuts from 2017, $350 billion for deportations and border security, over $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP food assistance, a near complete rollback of Biden-era clean energy incentives and investments. It guts the Biden student debt repayment program, and there's just a whole list of many more regressive changes.
Yeah, it's kind of like Oprah in reverse. Like, you lose healthcare and you lose food stamps. And I mean, Brian, everybody loses with this bill unless you're a member of the that ultra rich club.
Right. It's reverse Robin Hood, stealing from the poor and give to the rich.
That's exactly right. And then when you look at like the real world effects of what this is all going to cause. They're increasing the deportation budget, and that's just going to really mean that we have more ICE agents roaming around, snatching people up and violating their due process rights. And you mentioned the environmental impact, the rolling back of all of these clean energy initiatives. They, on top of that, they added a tax to the alternate energy sources. So utility bills are going to go up, and the United States is just going to continue to fall behind in the technology race, and then he talked about the student loan payments. It could double in some cases, just making it more and more unaffordable for the American people.
Yeah, and we've been pointing out for weeks that it will negatively impact rural states like Kentucky disproportionately. Governor Beshear has been quite vocal about this. He's pointed out that this could all lead to 20,000 Kentucky healthcare workers losing their jobs, 35 rural hospitals closing, and possibly over 200,000 Kentuckians losing insurance.
Yeah, I mean, that turns out like losing that insurance, that's like 1 in 20 Kentuckians. So that's 1 in 20 of your neighbors, 1 in 20 of your family members or coworkers. The ramifications of this are just massively widespread.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Think about 1 in 20 of all the people in your network could be adversely affected by this. Right. And it's not just healthcare. With the SNAP benefits on the chopping block, food banks right here in Kenton County, which are already overwhelmed, are going to be even in a bigger bind. And this bill is kicking people when they are already down and then really just stripping away every last shred of their dignity. Even the supposed positive pieces of the legislation, such as the claim of eliminating taxes on Social Security, turn out to be, well, surprise, essentially a lie. In fact, the White House earned a community note on X for its claim that the bill meant no tax on Social Security. And that's a quote from their X post, that they said the big, beautiful bill equals no tax on Social Security. X readers had to add context through a community note to the post, clarifying that the big ugly doesn't really eliminate taxes on Social Security, but rather merely provides a tax deduction for seniors age 65 and up. And that tax deduction does not apply to everyone in this age group, is prorated based upon income, and is temporary, only lasting through 2028. But hey, that White House announcement was close.
That's right. I guess if they lie enough about it, people will believe it until it affects them. Right. So, we could throw out these numbers and statistics, but what is real are the ripple effects that are going to be felt when all of this sets in. When hospitals close, jobs vanish. And in many counties that are rural, the hospitals are the largest employers in the area. Yeah. When food assistance disappears, kids go hungry. And when all of that happens at once, I mean, that's truly a recipe for economic disaster, especially, as you said, in rural Kentucky. And then we have the economic impact. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy came out strongly against the bill, pointing out what we've all been saying, how it's going to strip healthcare and food assistance from millions of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Kentuckians.
It's like pulling the thread on a sweater. Except the sweater is your local economy, and now you're cold, unemployed, and hungry. We're also looking at the ripple effects of cuts to safety net programs could push more Kentuckians into poverty, especially in regions already struggling with post-pandemic recovery.
Yeah, I've heard some of the food banks already across the state are sounding the alarm. And of course, we talked a little bit about that healthcare piece, and the healthcare piece is kind of near and dear to my heart. So on top of all the universities losing billions of dollars in funding, now this bill is just going to be like this another catastrophic nail in the coffin. Right. When you cut $1 trillion in federal Medicaid and $340 billion that directly affect our state, state level funding, I mean, it's going to hurt. Essentially, what all these Kentucky Republicans did is greenlit a massive attack on rural healthcare. And it's going to turn out to be the largest loss of healthcare in the United States history, which is just incredibly sad.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the Kentucky Hospital Association has come out against this in every way. Jim Musser, who is the senior VP for Policy and Government Relations with the KHA, quoted, this is a quote, "It is damaging to the access to care and damaging to the health of our people. And then on top of that, it's going to damage the economy." I I mean, that's a triple threat there.
Absolutely. And, and that's what other organizations, right? The American Medical Association and other healthcare organizations have released statements after it was passed. And I mean, the sad thing is we already know that this is an anti-science, anti-healthcare administration. So to be honest with you, they just don't care. They don't care as long as the Mar-a-Lago members get their tax break.
That's right. That's right. If you recall when Trump had a lot of the billionaires and especially in the oil industry down to Mar-a-Lago and said, if you give me $1 billion, I promise I'll make it worth your while. And this is exactly what this bill is doing. But Democrats aren't taking this lying down. Governor Beshear worked really hard with health advocates and rural leaders to push back with amendments to the legislation. And so did many other Democratic governors across the country. But ultimately, they failed to stop a lot of the damage.
Yeah, and that's because, we just didn't have the power to stop it. And it just proves once again that the Democrats are the ones fighting for the people, right? And the Republicans, on the other hand, they're out there just denying that any of this is happening, right? They're like, no one's going to lose their health insurance. And that's a total lie. Or they'll say that, only undeserving freeloaders are going to lose their insurance. This won't affect the hardworking Americans. And then when it gets really sad, I don't know if you heard some of the words that came out of our senators' mouths. Joni Ernst from Iowa said, we're all going to die at some point anyway. And then you got Mitch McConnell saying, yeah, we've been hearing a lot from the people in Kentucky about the Medicaid, and they'll get over it. So it's just a blatant disregard for the American people on so many levels.
Yeah, it's a good thing they went into government and not say the medical, like became doctors, because that's some pretty terrible bedside manner there. It's all I got
Absolutely.
To say. Well, we've said many times that cruelty is one of the hallmarks of the Trump administration. So, hey, no surprise its signature legislation would continue in that vein. And, the kicker to all of this is it will just explode the deficit. Despite the massive health care and SNAP cuts, the Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, estimated the bill will add nearly $4 trillion to the nation's deficit over the next 10 years. Hey, GOP, the party of fiscal responsibility.
I mean, so far from it. And I have friends who this is their sticking point. This is almost their breaking point, saying, I thought he was going to reduce the deficit. I'm like, did you really? But so what they're doing now is they're responding by trying to discredit the CBO as an organization, as well as all of the findings. But during the Biden administration, even Mike Johnson was out there quoting CBO estimates as gospel, right? But now all of a sudden, they're wrong and they're a terrible organization and all of that crazy stuff. But, as much as this big ugly bill is terrible, there are some bright spots, especially in the state of Kentucky, thanks to Governor Beshear's leadership and members of his Team Kentucky administration, for sure.
Yeah, I love it when we can look to Kentucky and see some positive outcomes and some really good things happening. Yeah, Kentucky is ranked third in the nation for rural job growth. Our state has seen record low unemployment for the longest period ever recorded under Governor Beshear's leadership. And also, under Governor Beshear, Kentucky has cut overdose deaths for 3 straight years, primarily by expanding addiction treatment to 142,000 Kentuckians through Medicaid and providing targeted recovery services to over 17,000 people. Unfortunately, however, these gains may only be temporary, as funding could be cut by the big ugly bill.
Yeah, and that's exactly why he's got such a great approval rating here in Kentucky. He's creating jobs, focusing on healthcare, prioritizing public safety. And this is how Kentucky's Democratic leadership continues to improve the lives of Kentuckians. And they don't stop. Governor Beshear's been holding pre-K for all town halls across the state that have been really well attended. Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman was on site in Metcalfe County for an opening of a new food bank, which will provide food assistance to insecure families and adult education and support classes for seniors. And then we have a Democratic Congressman, Morgan McGarvey, who introduced a Cutting Copays Act in the Kentucky legislature to try to eliminate prescription drug copays for over 270,000 Kentucky seniors and people with disabilities. They're also working on expanding mobile health care clinics in rural communities. And all this is going to help cushion some of the blowback from this big, ugly bill. But of course, it's not going to be able to absorb all of the pain that's coming.
No, and Congressman McGarvey's bill reminds me of the $35 insulin that the Biden administration came up with and was able to enact, which of course is now gone. But those are the kinds of policies and the kinds of laws that really just directly improve people's lives. And the rest of the country is looking up to Kentucky. Over the last 5 years under Governor Beshear's leadership, Kentucky has broken every economic development record, from private sector investment to new jobs to the best 3-year average in wages. We've broken our export records twice, and we broke tourism records for 3 straight years with $14.3 billion in economic impact.
Yeah, those tourism numbers are really outstanding for our great Commonwealth. It's not only great visibility for Kentucky, but it's fueling the job growth here for sure. It's supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs, everyone from restaurant workers to hotel staff. When you have 80 million people visiting the great state of Kentucky, all of that's going to have an import on transportation and restaurants and entertainment. So it's really been great to see.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you have strategic investments in tourism and economic development.
Oh my goodness, right? And those investments in tourism and economic development have generated over $35 billion in total investment. But what I think is kind of fun, do you know which industry is really kicking it here in Kentucky?
Well, Natalie, I have you covered there. Being the bourbon aficionado that I am, I already know this one.
You're on top of this one.
Kentucky's bourbon and spirits industry recorded over $2.1 billion in new investments, with approximately 700 new jobs, while 33 bourbon tourism development projects totaling $1 billion in investment will create nearly 5,000 additional jobs once operational. That is, as long as we can avoid further damage from the Trump tariffs. Don't forget, those are still lurking out there, ready to cause more self-inflicted pain by Mr. Art of the Deal himself.
I have not heard Mr. Art of the Steal yet, and I love it. Thank you for introducing me to that.
That's a classic.
That's fantastic. Wow, it's so true. It's so spot on, right? Or the great grifter. This makes me so proud to not only be a Kentuckian, but a Kentucky Democrat, because outside of all the good things that are happening here in our little blue dot, the Trump administration is doing everything in its power to halt this kind of progress. So we're going to just keep fighting, for what is right. And I think we're making a lot of really good progress. And again, it just makes me proud to be a Democrat for sure.
Same here.
Well, there's one thing that we can do to stop all this MAGA insanity, and that's to vote for candidates who will push back bad Republican policies and advocate for the pro-working class policies we're seeing from the Democrats. So while Kenton County Democrats do not endorse any primary candidates, we do want to lend a platform for all voices to share their vision. So let's bring in someone who just doesn't talk the talk. She's walking the walk. Monica Dean is a Navy veteran and now a Democratic candidate for Kentucky's 4th Congressional District. Monica, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for asking me to come on.
First off, thank you so much for your military service and everything you've done for our country. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
What made you decide to jump into the political ring?
Well, a lot of the advocacy that I was doing that actually was the reason I was named 2023 Kentucky Woman Veteran of the Year was around advocating for people who were going to the VA and things like that. So I'd end up having to call at the federal level a lot, anyways, especially when people were doing like their claims process or things like that. So I ended up learning a lot about that. And I did not have a plan to run for Congress, but when I moved to Oldham County from Nelson County, I saw that no one had filed to run against Thomas Massey. And so, I was disappointed in that. And when I started asking around, I did not find anyone who was planning on running. So I decided to throw my hat in the ring. And honestly, it's been amazing because I've learned so much more on how I can better fight for the communities that I'm involved with.
Yeah, we are so glad that you are throwing your hat into the ring. Tell us just a little bit about yourself. So where do you live at in Kentucky? Where are you at?
So I am in Oldham County in Crestwood, which is just south of LaGrange. And it's real beautiful here. I moved here with my whole family, my mom, my stepdad. my grandma, my grandpa, my son who just turned 4, and 4 dogs. So we all live in the same house.
Oh, wow.
Um, and we moved here because the school system is supposed to be really good here in Orem County, and my son is going to be starting public school next year. So I wanted to go ahead and take the opportunity to move here. And my stepdad, he got a different job, and I worked from home, so it all just kind of worked out that way.
That's amazing. And you did just mention that you were recognized as Kentucky's Woman Veteran of the Year. Tell me a little bit how the military kind of shaped your leadership style, and if that, you'd be able to pull that through with your political vision at all.
Yes. So the leadership style of the military is definitely a little bit different than you would probably put out there in the private sector. But it did set me up well as far as being able to work with just about anybody, and being adaptable and resourceful. So those things I have carried with me throughout my career. And the thing that I have learned in my career as a project manager after the military, that actually is so critically important, I think, in this next chapter is servant leadership and psychological safety. So, creating teams and environments where people are comfortable talking about challenges they're having and talking about ways we can improve processes. Those things are, that's my job. That's what I do every day with multiple teams, and large companies. So, I think that translates really well into leadership and public service. And I'm just really excited to be able to use those skills in a whole new capacity.
Yeah, you've spoken about being a single mother and a working professional. How do those lived experiences influence your policy priorities?
Greatly, because it gives me a lot of perspective. As a single mom, I've had to work on trying to get healthcare for my son, and daycare expenses are insane. And I also, my son, he had some hearing issues when he was younger, so he had to do speech therapy and behavioral therapy there for a while. So I also kind of got a peek into sort of the IEP process and where we were going to go with that. But thankfully, we were able to get him some tubes in his ears, and his hearing improved greatly. But I just got to see a peek into that process, and it's already so complicated, and defunding it makes it so much worse. So,
Mm.
I think that perspective is going to be very beneficial for me in understanding the realities that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and trying to help make those things less complicated, less difficult, and more accessible.
The IEP, could you just tell us what that is and make sure all of our listeners know?
So it's an individual education plan. That's what
Oh,
it
okay.
stands for. Each child has different needs, regardless of where you're at as far as like intellectual capability or physical capability. There's a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
variations there. But when your child is maybe falling behind on certain milestones, and it is something that they can identify, um, then they can put the child on a individual plan and give them state funded resources like behavioral therapy or speech therapy. It's an extremely valuable program.
Well, and that's a real case study for what we're looking at that's going to be impacted right now with, the bill.
Yes, that's all in the Title I funding.
Right, right.
I was just going to say, as a side note, when we had a booth at the Northern Kentucky Pride event, and one of the booths that were there was somebody who works with St. Elizabeth for to help funding for children who have hearing impairments, and she was collecting signatures to send to Mitch McConnell because the funding for a lot of that early detection has been cut. And it's just interesting that is something that you've experienced. So that's very interesting. So speaking of, a lot of the healthcare, I know you had said that you have a perspective that healthcare is infrastructure, right? So how can you take that concept to reality to make healthcare more affordable and accessible in Kentucky?
I have a lot of ideas as a way that we can kind of step towards a maybe a single payer system. But there's a lot of work that has to happen between where we are now and actually getting there. So I've been focusing a lot of my policy on that, as coming up with interim solutions to get us closer, things that could actually get people healthcare now. And some things that I've been thinking about, and I've been kind of working with leaders in the healthcare here in Northern Kentucky. I've been talking about expanding VA access, and connecting it with Medicare and Medicaid. I haven't worked out all the details yet, but a step in the right direction would be allowing first responders to qualify for those programs. So if there's a first responder or even like a frontline worker. So when we were talking and during COVID, grocery store clerks and people who work in these, critically important jobs, that are often undervalued and overlooked, they need health care. And I think that getting them eligibility for one of these programs would be beneficial. And it could be a buy-in system too, which I'm trying to kind of see how that would work. But I'm trying to find ways in the interim, realistically, to get people healthcare now, so that we can get further to the point of a single payer system. But we will have to fight the headwinds of pharmaceutical industry and the insurance industry. So in the meantime, we have to find solutions.
Well, I think that incremental approach makes a lot of sense because you say healthcare for all, and it kind of tends to blow some people's minds. And, I think if you can figure out a progressive, incremental way to do it, we can get there and they don't even realize that that was the road that we were
Right,
on.
exactly. And it's a lot less painful to, well, to conceptualize it, just in the way that our healthcare system is set up right now. It's to get where we are, from where we are to that, just seems so completely unlikely. But there are ways that we can step into it.
Well, you've said that strong schools mean a strong Kentucky. What are your top goals for public education in the district?
So obviously, we need to protect the Department of Education. We need to protect Title I funding and expand those things. But also on the state level, I would need to work with state legislators and advocate for catching up with inflation on our budget for our students, because we've had increases for per student funding on the state level, but it hasn't caught up with inflation since I think 2012. So at this point, where we should be spending, if we stayed on track, we should be spending like $5,500 per student. We're only spending like 4,300, and that gap is really big, and it can really make it difficult for us to function well as a school system. So I think that that's a big one too, is advocating in that. Also, expanding access to early childhood education. I think a universal pre-K would be extremely beneficial to everyone. If you want people to work in the economy, you have to set up systems to allow that to happen. And right now, we do not have that. It costs more money than you can make to get childcare. And then also investing in STEAM, so STEM with arts and trades, and getting civics back into classes, because I think civics is something that we really, really need to revisit as a society. We have to understand, at least at a functional level, how our system works so that we can participate in it and actually hold on to democracy.
And Governor Beshear's on the Pre-K for All listening tour right now. I'm sure you're familiar with his push for that. And I think that would really obviously help rural areas as well. I mean, there's so much. Talk a little bit about that Pre-K for All, like how you think that would benefit, and not only rural Kentuckians, but Kentuckians across the state.
So I'll give an example. My son, he just turned 4. I pay $245 a week for him to go to daycare so that I can work. That is nearly $1,000 a month. That's a lot of money. That is twice a really nice car payment. So
Right.
that that alone, just the cost offset is huge when, like, say someone wants to get into nursing, in a rural community. They want to get into nursing. Maybe they want to work for, maybe one of the nursing homes that are in their community because maybe somebody in their family is going there or something like that. It's the barrier to entry for that specific person many times is, I don't have childcare, I can't afford childcare. if we can if we could provide, even just for 4-year-olds, free childcare, we would see an increase in participation in the economy. It would take a little bit of stress off of our social programs. It would boost the economy locally. Those, they would be traveling, they would be getting gas, they would have the car, they would, all these things kind of like connect to each other.
It's all
So
compounding.
when we can build the infrastructure, just like a road, if we can build something to allow someone to go somewhere and do something, then it helps a lot.
Yeah, you can definitely see how all those play together, and there should be a positive outcome to
Yeah,
that.
it's economic stimulus in the area, and it's organic, but it's not. It's like supported economic stimulus. And there's so many like incredible unknowns that we could benefit from in those situations too.
Well, if you think about how many people are kept from the workforce just because of exactly what you're speaking about and the value they could bring.
I do want to say too, even with childcare, it can be difficult to keep your job. Like, especially if you're a single parent. My son, when he was 6 months old, no, he was 8 months old. That's when I started taking him to daycare. He almost immediately started getting sick. So every other week he was sick, and then I would get what he got. So it took like a year, seriously. And thankfully,
Right.
the job that I have, my boss is really supportive, the company's really supportive, but not a lot of people have that.
I have seen you everywhere. Like you were out there pounding the pavement. You were just at the Fort Mitchell parade with us. That was great to see you there. What are you hearing from people on the ground? Like, what are the top issues that you're hearing most come from people when you're out there in the field?
Well, I'm hearing a lot that people are scared, but really they are just irritated. They're annoyed that they have not been listened to. They don't feel supported by the people that they have hired to do these jobs that are supposed to help their communities. And I think that's just a big thing. And it's not just one party or the other party. It's all the way around. We've gotten really comfortable, and we need people who are out there, who are hitting the pavement, who are talking to people, who are listening to the issues that people have. And a lot of it is healthcare access. It's typically like somebody's grandmother is dealing with cancer, and they have all of this medical debt, and they are facing bankruptcy. Like these stories are all over the place, and just listening to them and building that into the plan to try and find solutions. That's what they're looking for. That's what I'm looking for. As a citizen too, is like, I have a story. I a lot of things in my life, like with my grandma and grandpa living with me, I see a lot of different things. My grandma, she has dementia, and my grandpa, he has a prosthetic leg, and he goes to the VA. So there's all these stories that each person has in their life, and if you just sit and listen for a minute, you can understand just how incredibly important these programs are, these institutions are, and we have to find a way to make sure that they can be uplifted.
I love that. And I also just really, again, just want to say thank you for your service and support of the VA. We talk so much about how frustrating it's been and really just terrible it's been how, veterans have been treated. And I mean, especially recently, but really throughout, for a long time in our history, it's just have not been appreciated, I think, as they need to be. And it seems like with your background and some of the ideas and plans that you have, you could really start integrating, support for the VA and the veterans into a lot of these other institutions and policies, which I think would really help instead of, the VA sitting outside as something we have to support separately. Why isn't that more integrated into a lot of these solutions?
And when we think about how many veterans there are in our country, there's millions, and we are in every industry. Some of us are homeless in the streets. Like it goes from one end to the other, and there's a lot of different complicated reasons for all of it, but it's all intersectional. So when you start looking at the things that impact non-veterans, civilians, people who didn't serve in the military, those same things impact veterans. And if you can lift up anybody, you can lift up everybody. Is sort of the idea.
How can listeners get involved in your campaign and support your mission?
Well, so you can definitely go to monicadeanforcongress.com. That's my website. That's where I have a bunch of information to sort of, you can fill out a form to get involved in the campaign if you'd like to volunteer. You can also donate to the campaign. Donations are greatly appreciated. Campaigns cost a lot of money. And you can also on social media. So I am not just, everywhere on the ground. I am trying to be everywhere online too. So I'm on Substack. I try to write once a week on Substack. I have a newsletter. I am on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Blue Sky. I just signed up for X, which I'm not super excited about, but
It's like a
I'll be
necessary
on it. It's
evil.
Almost have to
fine.
be then.
But yeah, I'm all over the place. So, share, interact, comment, anything that you can do.
I did just discover your Substack as I was doing some research today on your website's excellent. It's got some great info, but I saw your Substack and I'm a big Substack fan. So I'm following you there as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I try to that's where like the heavy content is. Like I give updates on everything that's going on in the campaign, but also the news of the day, which is crazy always.
Yeah, I'm more newsletter kind of focused. I like the have some meat when I'm reading that, and I found that Substack in general does that. And yours, I read a couple of your posts; are really good.
Thank you.
We do like to do a little lightning round with our guest. If you'd be up for that, just something kind of fun before we let you go.
Yes, of course. I love these.
Alrighty. Okay, let's kick it off here. When it comes to reading, do you prefer a hard copy or audiobook?
So I do both, and it's ridiculous. My Spotify, I usually run out of hours for audiobooks because I like to do the 1.5 or 2 times speed. I do
Oh,
that on podcasts too. I'm currently in the middle of like 6 real books. So
Oh, wow, where do you find the
I
time?
don't, I just
Holy
kind of like
cow!
pick it up every now and then when I get a little bit of time, like a few minutes here and there. When I'm driving too, even though that'll probably go away soon because I'm supposed to do call time while I drive, but I need someone to drive me. So if somebody would like to volunteer to drive me to events so I can do call time. Totally.
We'll post that out there and see if we get any
Yeah.
takers.
yeah, you do it. You do it all. Like Brian said, how do you find the time? All right, so you do both the reading and the audiobook. Okay, second question: breakfast for dinner? Yes or no?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
Breakfast is the best.
Right
All
on.
right. And would you rather travel to the past or to the future?
When I was younger, I used to think that I was born in the wrong time, and I always thought that I should be born like during the 60s, that time. But honestly, this is exactly the time that I am meant to be in. So I feel called to be here in the present. So I don't think I would go back or forward.
Well, that's fair. That's fun.
Good
Yeah, good
answer.
answer. Okay, if you didn't enlist in the Navy, which branch of the military would you have chosen?
Air Force. They have better food.
Do
I was on
they?
an Air Force, yeah, I was on an Air Force base when I was in training. It was in Mississippi at Keesler Air Force Base. And oh, they had this fried catfish. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Okay, last one. If there's one thing you want voters to know about you that they won't find on your campaign website or your Substack or your X and Twitter, what would that be?
I love to dance.
There
I
you go.
I love to like when I will be dancing pretty much if I am out and there's music, regardless of where the setting, I will probably be dancing. I'm not particularly good at it, but I do like dancing. And I'm the same way with singing. I love to sing. Also not good at it, but I will still do it.
Well, you know what? Dance like no one's watching, sing like no one's listening, right? Do what makes you happy for
Yes.
sure. So,
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks so much, Monica. It was definitely a pleasure having you on the show, and we wish you lots of luck. And you know you have our support.
Thank you.
And if there's anything we can do to help help with your effort, just let us know.
Thank you. Yeah, totally. And if I can come back on the show, I'll definitely will.
We will definitely have you back.
absolutely.
As things progress later on, as things are moving down the road here, we'll have you back and we'll see how everything's going.
Awesome. Yeah, I've had two podcast interviews before this one, so I'm still kind of getting the flow of it, but this was great. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, we're kind of getting the flow of it too, so we'll all figure it out
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Thanks a
All right,
bunch.
thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. All right, everyone, we're going to wrap it up. But before we do, we always like to give you a call to action, and this is where you come in. If you're fired up, and we hope you are, here's a few things that you can do. First of all, we talked a lot about some of these local food banks that are really hurting. So get out there and support them. Be vocal about it. They're really struggling at this point. And most importantly, be ready to vote. You know, make sure that you're getting people signed up to vote. The 2026 midterms are going to be here before you know it. And candidates like Monica Dean are already starting to get out there. Start looking at those candidates, see how you can help. I always say you can donate either your time, talent, or a treasure, but all of them if you can. And the Kenton County Dems also have a really fun opportunity for you to come out and hang out with us. We're going to have a booth at the Kenton County Fair from July 14th through the 19th. There's going to be funnel cakes, political chat. Maybe we'll throw Brian at a dunk tank. I don't know. We'll see what we can pull off there.
Wait, what?
You didn't know that part? You know, be sure to also check out all of our upcoming events at KentonCountyDemocrats.org. You can RSVP for events there. Bring a friend, and let's keep fighting for a Kentucky that works for everyone. Brian, what do you have on your calendar coming up?
Well, things are really still ramping up for the Good Trouble Lives On rallies that are planned at locations across the U.S. on July 17th. That's the really next big nationwide set of events that are happening. We're going to be marching for justice, voting rights, and dignity for all. Please look at the 5051 website or goodtroubleliveson.org for more information. I just took a look at the map on the 5051 website before we started the pod, and there are 2 events scheduled in Cincinnati and events in Lexington, Louisville, and many other cities throughout Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. I also discovered another really good resource for tracking activist events. It is a Substack called We the People Dissent. If you're not familiar with Substack, check it out at substack.com or install the app on your phone and take a look. There is an amazing array of content creators posting their work on the Substack platform, and we just heard Monica in our interview mention that she has a Substack that she posts and writes on at least once a week. We the People Dissent labels itself as a bulletin board, and it looks like it does a really good job of staying current with all sorts of opportunities to engage in activism. So I plan to add it to my regular diet of pro-democracy information. And finally, I encourage listeners to consider signing up for email newsletters from organizations such as indivisible.org, 5051, Braver Angels is another great organization, and there are any number of pro-democracy organizations that are out there. Democracy Forward, Democracy Docket, Midas Touch. There's lots of others out there, and staying in touch through email newsletters is a good way to also see what all is going on and ways to get involved. These resources provide an excellent way to stay current with events and aware of all the political actions that affect the everyday lives of you, your family, and your community.
Yeah, thanks so much for pointing those out. I learned so much from you with all of this great information that you bring to the table. Many of these I hadn't heard of before, so I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Otherwise, that is it for this week. Thank you for joining the Blue Dot Podcast. We'll, of course, be back in 2 weeks to bring you up to speed with all things political and Kenton County and beyond. And don't forget, you can join the conversation at our Facebook and Instagram pages or at blue.podcast.com. And of course, if you like listening to the podcast, please consider donating to help fund the podcast, which you can do by clicking on the donate link at our website, blue.podcast.com. So until next time, continue to stay curious, keep the facts in focus, and never stop fighting for what matters. And peace out, everybody.